Now, you'd think that a country like Canada, who now is the largest exporter of uranium in the world, and Saskatchewan, northern Saskatchewan, is the single largest supplier of uranium in the world. The largest resources in the world are there. The largest operating mine in the world, the Key Lake mine, is in Saskatchewan. The new Cigar Lake mine, I think I mentioned it, is called a geological elephant. It is so huge, and it's all contained in a relatively small volume. It's one great big cubic mile of an ore body containing uranium in a proportion that's 70 times as rich as any other mine in the world, some 300 million pounds there. We could, if Canada wanted, it could do the following. It could say, you can buy uranium from us. Yes, we won't withhold the sale of uranium. But we must have guaranteed inspections of all the processing of that uranium so that none of our uranium is diverted from civil to military use. And secondly, that all the residues that are left over from what they call the enriching process must be returned so that you can't use that portion. They call the depleted uranium. You can't use that in the manufacture of weapons. And we don't do that. That's the minimum. We either should have an embargo and not ship any. If our values were more important than the dollars that we earn, a huge amount of export dollars, we would do something like that, because that's the reputation Canada had, the reputation of being a leader in waging peace, a leader in mediation in the world, and dedicated to non-proliferation. Whereas we are now the leading contributor to the spread of nuclear weapons through diversions of our uranium from peaceful applications.
What's happening environmentally in Saskatchewan right now?
Well, what's happening is quite frightening. Quite aside, let me just give you a picture of the environmental threats. You first of all have a toll on the workers, the uranium miners and millers. It is such a huge toll that the death rate from lung cancer in the uranium mines in southern Ontario, in the Elliott Lake region, has been doubling every 6 to 7 years. And we know that the latest knowledge about radiation hazards are such that they are being exposed to levels which are unacceptable from a health protection point of view. There is nothing to stop installing control technology to reduce the exposure to the miners. So all over the world there are miners who are dying from lung cancer, from exposure. Then, because we build up these huge tailings, these mountains of tailings, to give you an idea, Canada alone has 150 million tons of unmanaged tailings. United States has 200 million tons of unmanaged tailings. Now, why are they an environmental threat? Because they give off an invisible radioactive gas called radon, which is devastating in its capacity to induce lung cancer at very low levels of exposure. And as I mentioned, a very conservative figure for the US is that 30 people from the community at large, not the workers, but the general community living in the region of uranium mining, from the tailings alone, and if those tailings were well managed, which they're not, 30 will die per year. And the half-life of the longest lived material, thorium, which eventually decays into radon, is 76,000 years. So those exposures are going to go on indefinitely, taking their toll year after year, their environmental toll. And the cost, incidentally, let's say it's $20 a ton to clear up the tailings and manage them. 200 million times 20, you know, you're talking about $4 billion just there, and that's a modest estimate. And Canada's tailings are even growing more rapidly because our exports are all yet to come because of these huge deposits we have. So then there's one other sinister environmental impact that's fascinating. That is, in the decay series of all the radioactive materials that start with uranium and end up with stable non-radioactive lead, there is one called radium. So it's always present. Whenever you've mined uranium, in the tailings that are left over from that mining, not only do they generate this invisible poisonous gas, but they all contain radium. Now, radium has been called by a kind of Dr. Strangeloves of health physics as a superb carcinogen. It is perhaps the most effective cancer-causing substance. Dangerous because it is soluble. It forms soluble salts in water. So once it gets into groundwater, river systems, it spreads all over the area fed by those waters. It has a 1,600-year half-life. So if there's a gram in the water, 1,600 years from now, there's still a half a gram, and it causes bone cancer. It's highly correlated with skin and bone cancer. So this is the legacy of the mismanagement of uranium mining, which is horrifying. The fact is that those people who operate the mines, those corporations, are not toilet trained.
You talk about Canada's CANDU reactor and Canada's involvement in the proliferation reactor program.
Yeah, well, Canada had a fairly unique reactor. It was unique because it operated on natural uranium. All the leading reactors in the world are derived from two basic patents, a Westinghouse patent and a General Electric patent. They've captured the world market, and through leasing arrangements, they are the leading reactors in the world, 95% of all the reactors, okay? Canada had this unique reactor that uses natural and not enriched uranium, and they thought that they would capture world markets with that reactor. Well, it's been a colossal failure because you can't fight the Americans in the world market. And it's been, in effect, a kind of loss leader. We've sold every single reactor at a loss, always on the assumption, you know what a loss leader in a grocery store is, you know. You put one item on the shelf that you take a loss, hoping that the customers will come in, buy that item that's cheap, and then fill their grocery basket with all the other items that they overcharge you with, okay? Well, we've had a permanent loss leader with CANDU that we've not made money. It's cost the Canadian public tens of billions of dollars in subsidies, and it's not been successful. So it's a failure.
Aren't all these nuclear reactors being used in some of these countries, or a lot of these countries?
Well, both India and Pakistan, and to a degree Argentina, used civil Canadian technology, which we supplied with bilateral treaties in which they were obligated not to divert materials to the military. And in all those cases they did. And we knew they would, and we still supplied it.